What happens when success stops feeling like enough? Today's guest, Paul Lister, walked away from a traditional business life and chose a wilder path, restoring land, rethinking legacy, and reconnecting people to nature. This is a conversation about purpose, resilience, and remembering who we really are. Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast, conversations shaped by curiosity, creativity, and connection. I'm your host, Shannon Miles Halliday, and this show is where we explore new possibilities and embrace the wild, beautiful, ever unfolding adventure of being human. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Miles to Zen podcast. I'm so glad you've joined us today. Today, we have a really interesting guest coming to us from Scotland. At least I think that's where you're based at the moment.
No, I'm in London.
Oh, you're in London.
But in Scotland quite often.
And our guest today is Paul Lister. He's the custodian of the Alladale Wilderness Reserve and the founder of the European Nature Trust, a UK-based charity. He's also a great adventurer and a great lover of rewilding. And our friend Sarah Tompkins introduced us from a previous podcast that she was on, and she's involved in rewilding in South Africa. And I'm so glad she's introduced us. Paul, welcome to Miles to Zen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, me too. I was so pleased that Sarah introduced us. And you've been up to some really amazing things and all this work that you've done already, setting up a nature trust, but this vision of yours that you've been executing up at Alladale, plus so many other things. But before we jump into that part, I wanted to understand a little bit of your journey of where you came from. So who was Paul Lister as a kid, and what were those early influences that you had that turned you into the guy that you are today?
Okay, well, I think in life, sometimes there are maybe two lives. I mean, a lot of people have breakthroughs in lives and turnarounds and, think twice about what they've been doing. And I'm a fairly good example of that. But life started for me, a privileged life, living in London. I went to a nice boarding school in the West Country of England and traveled a lot to interesting places, explored a little bit, maybe Africa, maybe the Caribbean, sailing. My dad was a big yachtsman, so he was an adventurer. And going on different trips, particularly one or two that I can remember vividly was a trip to Kenya. I must have been, I don't know, probably 10 or something. And various things happened on that trip, and you really get triggered into the raw nature.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it was kind of inbred in me, but it didn't really manifest until I was about 40. So I had this mission that I thought that I was a chip off the old block and that I had the entrepreneurial skills my father had, who I use the word quite lightly because the word entrepreneur is a lot of people think they're entrepreneurs, but they may be business people. But being an entrepreneur is when you can just keep making money. Everything you apply yourself to, you're good at trading and buying and selling. And Dad was one of those. I mean, he was quite exceptional at what he had accomplished in business. And in fact, when he sold his business eventually, he went on to set up a sailing academy in the Isle of Wight, which is now called the United Kingdom Sailing Academy, and probably is the largest sailing school in the world. And that's really his legacy. But he was successful in business. And I thought, well, in my 20s, I wasn't an academic. I didn't go to university, couldn't wait to get out of school and get on with life. And I went into one retail company in the UK for a couple of years to do some management training. And then I went on to my father's business, which at that time was the largest furniture retail business in Britain, with 180 odd stores and something like 15% of the marketplace of all furniture. And I spent a number of years there until I was 25. And then my father came down to breakfast one morning. And he said, Paul, I'm going to sell the business today, which obviously had been leading up to this. And
Yeah. Yeah.
the particular day that he was going to make the announcement. And he said to me, would you like me to keep any shares of the business so that you can perhaps get onto the main board of directors and, get more deeply involved with the company? And there was a group of directors all in their 30s. And I was 25 and they were very dynamic, maybe early 40s. And I said to my father, it's okay, sell all the shares and I'll go off and do my own thing. And and my dad said, well, what would that be? I said, well, I'm going to stay in the furniture business because, I know quite a lot of where these products are made, how to source, who big retailers are in Europe. And I'm going to become a trader. I'm going to come and import and export furniture from all manner of places. And he kind of looked at me, an odd look. And being a young 25-year-old and being a parent, and I'm not a parent, but I can imagine what it's been like being one, when you bring up somebody and you get to know them and they're going around masquerading as somebody else. And you must be thinking, oh my God, what's he doing? And it must be quite frustrating because as a parent, you just have to let your children go and let them explore and do things, even though it's going to end up in a calamity.
Isn't that classic? Somebody seeing you better than you see yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So, he said to me, why don't you go down the King's Road, rent an office above a shop, put on a woolly sweater and sell trips to Peru? I said, what? And he kind of figured that I wanted to get people into nature and I could become a travel agent of sorts. Yeah. And in fact, that's what I've ended up doing. Yeah. I've ended up connecting people to nature. The two things I like to do when, getting out of bed in the morning is making noise for nature, like shout about nature, and connecting people to nature. And he kind of knew way back when I was 25 that I should be doing something connected with travel and nature. And a lot of what I do these days is just that. And this is all these years on, 40 years on. And anyway, for the next 15 years, I went in the furniture business. And I was in various different guises, import, exporting. I even remember selling a contract of bunk beds, pine bunk beds, from South Africa to Mauritius, to a UK chain of stores called Quartz Furniture in Mauritius. And then I was selling contracts of kitchens from a factory in Glasgow to IKEA in Sweden, and did all sorts of things. And then in the last 5 years, I opened up furniture stores, and they were called Furniture to Go. It was really a hideous business. It was a cross between Costco and IKEA, if you can imagine anything more ghastly. And it was pretty successful. And my business partner and I, this is where the mistake came. The business partner and I, we had the same skill sets. We didn't have other owners involved or shareholders involved, which had a financial brain or might have had a resources brain or might have had some other skill set that we didn't share. We loved buying and we loved a bit of marketing, but we couldn't really the business. And eventually at the age of 40, many things happened in my life. Everything collided. Sometimes you need an episode to shift you and make a change in life. And mine was, my dad had a stroke. It was clear he was never going to recover. Had a long-term 5-year relationship that I had to finish. I had this business failure. And another thing I had was I lost my sense of smell through several operations with a deviated septum and this. So about 4, and there was something else as well. There were 5 things happened. And I ended up being pretty unhappy. And I went to rehab in America, actually. I went to Tucson, Arizona, and I worked on myself for a month, and lots of tears and, all that, emotions and sharing stories and things, and came back and decided that I was going to do a little turnaround for myself and get involved with philanthropy and rewilding.
Well,
so
that's amazing.
It was, you sort of, you get on the ground and you just can't see a way out. You just can't. You can't see out. How am I going to get off the ground? And everything was dark. A realization that I'm not a businessman or an entrepreneur. realization that the fortune or the wealth that my father created fell on my shoulders, and that I was going to have to be responsible for investments and things like this. And that was, for me, it was a turnaround in my life. And from that moment, I had to put the business into administration. And I remember what is now one of Britain's most successful retailers, a chap called Mike Ashley, tried to buy the business from me before we went into administration.
Right.
He said, "Paul, you don't need this headache." He could see me, he could read me. He said,
Yeah.
"You run the world, you buy everything for me, and I'm going to sell it." He said, "I'm going to run the stores, I'm going to do this and the other, and you can buy all the furniture."
You can do the part you like.
Yeah, and he was going to give me 10% of the business. And I said, "Mike, please, this is my baby. This is what I've worked so hard for." Anyway, 6 months, a year later, he ends up in the administrator's office offering 3%.
Oh,
To the dysfunctional former owner. And a company from Australia came over, and they had about 35 stores in New South Wales, Victoria, called Fantastic Furniture. And they'd been looking at what we've been doing for several years. And they came over and they offered me 25%. So
oh wow.
mistake number two was, with the big eyes, go, "Oh, 25%, I can be 20. I get, as a dysfunctional director of a company, in a new company, I can get 25% of the shares, which is a lot."
Yeah.
So anyway, I went with them, and things didn't work out. And after 12 months, they also imploded. So there we go. That was my episode into making a change and getting involved with setting up the European Nature Trust, and also spending a bit of time trying to find a place in Scotland that I could buy and then rewild.
So this point then, when you thought, okay, I'm going to listen to what my dad told me and do more things in nature, where was that? So when you went away and realized you wanted to do something in service.
I should actually add something. In the years that I was doing business,
Yeah.
I would be traveling around the world to various places. And on the back of doing business, on the back of being in factories, negotiating for contracts of furniture and so on, going to exhibitions, on the back of that, I would always go one step further into nature and explore wild nature as opposed to the plantations that we were buying timber from, to go deeper into nature. And so the journey going through the furniture industry led me to that. I don't think I could have needed to be in it for 15 years. I could have got away with 10 years. But it was that journey that took me into nature, because I would fall in love with the place I used to visit. Could be Brazil, could be South Africa, could be Finland, could have been Spain, could have been France. But I would always go one step deeper at the weekends after a business trip and get in touch with the nature in that particular place.
Well, isn't that funny? Because I had a similar experience with my job. I was traveling to these hydrogen projects around the world for, I don't know, about 5-6 years, and then did some other travel, but I would always tack on extra time to go out into nature, just like you. And so I would come back and my photographs would be the odd industrial site, a fueling station, a hydrogen bus, et cetera, some wind turbines. And then the majority would be all nature shots.
So you and I did, but a lot of people in our positions would have had families. They would want to run back to the kids or whatever. Not for me. So having no kids. So I would really enjoy those weekends. And I would think, I've amortized the airfare and my costs. And,
exactly.
Had an amazing opportunity to visit a Pantanal in Brazil.
Amazing.
Or one of the first, fence reserves in South Africa that Sarah's modeled her project on. So
where did this rewilding idea come for you?
Well, you have to understand, and this comes from years of deer hunting in my 20s. I used to stalk hinds in the winter in the west of Scotland, the West Highlands. And it was really a culling operation. It's not a trophy thing. It's a culling operation. I would go with a friend of mine once or twice a year, and it would be getting out from visitors on a weekend, Friday night, flying up to Glasgow and staying in a freezing cold cottage and getting up early in the morning and going out hunting. And when you start to work out what's happened in Britain, and you really start to understand that the landscape of the UK is completely depleted. From when you think about all the resources that were needed to fuel shipbuilding, fighting the Spanish in the Armada, the Industrial Revolution, the British Empire, 2 world wars, we absolutely decimated our old forests. And so nothing really remains in Britain of anything what it used to look like, maybe 1%. And it's terribly sad. It's terribly sad. And it's not just the UK. Europe is equally as bad, but maybe there's 5% left in Europe or some woodlands. In Britain, it's like 1%. So Britain is really the bottom of the pile. And when you start to realize just how denuded our landscape is and how man-made it is, then you think, wow, wouldn't it be nice if we could actually breathe a bit of life back into this place and create or demonstrate a model other than traditional land uses. And of course, in Scotland, traditional land use is hunting, shooting, fishing. I mean, that's what Queen Victoria glamorized back in the day. It's hunting for stags, shooting for grouse, fishing for salmon. And even properties in Scotland, the values of that property was always based on the amount of those species that could be shot or caught or whatever, or fished in a year. Rather bizarre. And so it's clear to me that when you look at, I can see a landscape and absolutely understand straight away whether it's been sort of in any way, shape, distorted. And of course, much of the world has been. You can virtually say that 27% of the Earth's surface, non-desert, non-ice, by the way, has been logged, burned, cut, felled, and destroyed to grow cattle. So we weren't, Britain was the same. If it wasn't the hunt, shoot, and fishing, it was sheep.
Yeah.
Sheep took over the hills, and we end up with this, what I call a soggy desert. So to get a piece of ground in the Highlands, to restore it, and by that I mean planting trees, actively planting trees, not just hoping they're going to grow. You've got to actively plant them, reducing deer numbers greatly, so that you have to imagine how many deer would normally be there if there were predators around, large carnivores, bears and wolves and lynx. And then we also restored peatland. And all this now is starting to show, and Alladale's become an example of what can be when you give nature a chance and you step in and take an active hand. I'd love to think you could just think by not, putting sheep on the ground, things will start coming back, but that's not the case.
Right.
We didn't have a huge seed source around, so you have to actively plant trees. And that's a very costly and timely thing to do, but it's worth doing.
Right. Yeah. So you found your dream chunk of land then in Scotland. So you decided there's got to be something more to just culling of deer. And you set your eyes on getting a piece of property in Scotland.
I had 10 criteria when I was looking for Alladale. I had 10 things that I wanted. And when Alladale came on, it got 8 out of 10. We always wanted 50,000 acres.
Right.
23,000.
Okay.
But
that's a lot of space already.
Yes, it is. It's a lot of space, but when it's quite poor ground for the reasons we've spoken about before, and it's not exactly highly productive landscape. What really the value now is on nature tourism.
Right.
That's where the revenue streams come in now, is people wanting to come in to the landscape, to Alladale, to see what's been going on, the rewilding, and to have a restorative break. We do yoga retreats. We do family groups, individuals, couples. We have 3 lodges that we rent out, fully catered. And we are literally in the geographical center point of the Scottish Highlands. If you were cut out the Scottish Highlands on a piece of card and it would be bang in the middle. You could see the North Sea from the same hill as you can see the Atlantic Ocean. So it's a very unique place. And it's like at the end of the road. There's no passing traffic or anything, we're quite remote. For Britain, we're remote, not remote compared to certain places in North America, obviously, or South Africa or Australia. But for Britain, to get to our nearest town, which is sort of a 50-minute drive away, which is for the UK, that's quite a distance.
Yes.
When you're up there and you see the landscape and everything, you couldn't imagine your 1 hour's flight from London.
Oh, it just looks absolutely gorgeous. And I can't wait to come visit. I've already have a romance novel writing in my head based in Alladale.
Oh, really?
Absolutely.
Alladale has been actually a topic of more than one novel.
Okay.
Yeah, it has been. It has been. I can't remember the names of the books now, but people ring me up and said, I'm reading a book at the moment. I'm sure it's about Alladale.
That's hilarious.
The person wrote it and researched it and called us up and various things, had chats with them. That's over the last 20 years, I think 2 books.
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, Scottish laird, wolves, wilding. It's perfect.
Yeah.
So then tell me about this rewilding journey that you got Alladale. You've started it up as sort of an ecotourism. You started a project a while back with cats.
Yes, we are part of the Edinburgh Zoological Society's captive breeding program. The Scottish wildcat, which is the same species as the wildcats that live all over Europe, but we call it the Highland tiger.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
And now they are being bred in a big breed and release center in the Highlands, and it's been quite successful. In fact, we have a film screening in April of a film that we sponsored about these cats in London. If anyone's in the UK in April, they can come and join us. Have fun. But I think the reason why Scotland was because I'd also been going to Romania. And when you visit Romania, which is the opposite end of Europe to where we are, and you see the beautiful forests of the Carpathian Mountains, and you understand that it's full of bears and wolves and lynx, it really does motivate you, makes you feel also sad about what we've managed to get rid of. Britain had all these species, and we shot them all out to extinction. And yet Romania, and now many other countries, in fact, Britain, Ireland, Malta, and Cyprus are the only countries in Europe that have no wolves.
Right.
Wolves are migrated right through Europe now. There are far more wolves than there are in North America. That's also a challenge. And that's why in our foundation, the European Nature Trust, we do quite a lot of work with trying to uphold the protection on wolves across Europe, because it's all too easy for people to say, why do we need them back? Why can't we just get rid of them? And I think it's so audacious. Humanity really thinks it wants dominion over everything. And yet wolves are doing such an amazing job as ecosystem engineers. Managers, I should say.
Right. And so is that why you wanted to reintroduce them then into Scotland? Why you had this idea?
Yeah, I always wanted to bring wolves back inside a 50,000 acre fenced enclosure.
Okay.
It was never to reintroduce them.
Right.
Reintroducing means releasing into the wild. Mine was to release them into a Sarah Tompkins Samara style reserve.
Yeah.
And instead of having all the predators and all the prey species that you have to deal with in Africa, and there are dozens, we'd be dealing with the wolf and the red deer.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly complicated. And it would demonstrate just exactly how a wolf, carnivores, would attract tourism.
Yeah.
The numbers, the statistics these days, anyone that's studied what's going on in Yellowstone realizes that now, since the wolves came back, $80 million a year additionality to the Greater Yellowstone area of industries, of hotels and park entrance fees, gas stations, restaurants, whatever. All this range of services, it's $80 million a year has been added since the wolves came back. The same applies for jaguar tourism in southern Brazil. I'm going there in the beginning of April, and it's something like $1,500 a night or $2,000 a night to stay, because the demand for that people want to see, big cats, and in the case of Yellowstone wolves, is enormous. And that would make a big difference to the Scottish Highlands locally if wolves were back in an area.
And so Sarah talked a lot about when you introduce the apex predators, there's a lot of different things that fall into place. So I know that in Yellowstone, there was waterways that started to change their course back to a more original course that they had, because the deers tended to
browse on the and things like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that famous video when wolves changed rivers that George Monbiot.
Yeah, that must be the one that's
50 million
playing
hits.
in the back of my
50
head.
million hits. Yeah, a lot of hits on that. Yes, of course. At the moment, Britain has got something like 2 million deer. We don't know, but approximately 2 million deer. The natural carrying capacity will be more like 500,000. So we've got 4 times as many deer as we should have. Now, I'm not saying we can release wolves in Britain. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think we can release them into a fenced reserve, and then there can be more of these fenced reserves, and it can, just like what's going on in South Africa, and maybe one day they can be linked up. But deer left unchecked will browse every young sapling into submission.
Right.
You've no idea what the damage they can do if they're overpopulated.
Right.
But if you have no apex predator controlling the trophic cascade, then man normally has to step in. But and we are with a rifle and stuff, but not to the extent we need to.
Right.
And venison is a great meat. It's very lean. It's wild, better than beef, for example, or whatever.
Yeah, and the deer have one bad moment rather than
one bad
life.
I mean, and 1 minute the deer is alive and it's dead in its natural wild place. It's not been shuffled into a truck and shipped halfway around the globe or whatever.
So is there still a plan to try to get wolves into Alladale, or are you still dealing with the neighbors?
I've tried to buy more land around me in the past, but have not succeeded. The neighbors around Alladale are fairly traditional. However, they are changing. You can't not change. There's so much going on in the world that you need about carbon and things like this that you can't be completely oblivious. So there is a change, but change takes time. And whilst I'd love to think wolves can come back and we can get the space we need, I'm not driven by it every day. I don't think to myself, oh, I've failed. I haven't brought wolves back. Oh my God, how disappointing. No, I don't. Because I get a lot of my excitement also through the foundation with work in Spain, Portugal, Italy, Romania, and more recently, North Macedonia, Albania, and Greece. So there's a lot of very interesting projects in Europe that are well worth helping in some way or shape or form. And that's what we like to do within the foundation. So to see wolves back in Alladale will be amazing. But in the meantime, we've done an awful lot without having wolves. And we've made quite a bit of noise doing it. And a lot of landowners over the last 10 years have come to visit us and go, right, okay, that's what that looks like when you planted a million trees. And they think about what they're doing in their properties and they take something away. Now, we don't follow them. We don't go down the road and check what. Yeah. But you can see when someone has a bit of a shift, when they see all these trees that have been planted and how a forest is coming.
Right.
And that actually is a really good benefit from what we've been doing. It's demonstrating what a landscape kind of like once you've started to put a bit of energy and effort and resource into it. That fuels me, and just creating that new model, instead of extraction, is one of bringing something back.
Yeah. And there's that saying around, you never know your true impact, right? It's like the unseen impact of what you're doing there.
Absolutely. I mean, we hold press trips, probably 5 a year into Europe, to Belize, to Spain. We take Spanish journalists into Spanish nature, Italians into Italian. We're now taking a group of Swedes, Finns, and Norwegians to Italy to see how the Italians coexist with wolves and bears in Abruzzo Park, 2 hours drive outside of Rome. We're taking journalists from Scandinavia to report back and say, listen, guys, they're doing in Italy. This is not an affluent part of Europe. This is central Pennines. It's a very rural area. And they're living with, 2,000 to 3,000 wolves and several, bears as well. And we're in Scandinavia with oceans of forest and few people and vast spaces. And we're going to allow 350 wolves in Sweden. I mean, it's to really get them to understand. So we want to try and shock a little bit or inform the Scandinavian public about what's going on in a place like Italy, and far more densely populated than Scandinavia,
Yeah.
and to look inwardly at themselves, think, my God, why do we think we've got such a problem with these animals? Why can't we let them come back?
Right.
Why should we think they're competing with us in elk hunting or whatever it is that they do? So we do enjoy making noise for nature, and that's our noise for nature strategy. And the articles that come from that, there's no measuring what happens. There's no measuring. It's like, I just know that when you start sending out some interesting stories and with certain outcomes, there will be change. And it just takes time. We do the same thing for NGOs in Europe that are, for instance, the Iberian Lynx was down to 100 animals 25 years ago. There's now probably 4,000 or 5,000, and it's off the red list, and the animals getting more and more secure. And this was an incredible initiative by some NGOs, and no one really knew about it. So we thought, well, we would take a group of Spanish journalists, 8 of them, for 3 or 4 days into the field in Andalusia, and tell the story. And then they could go out in the papers and the blogs or whatever it is they do and other media and start telling people, this is a great story. We need to shout about this. When you've stayed an animal like the Iberian lynx for extinction, then it's great news. Let's tell people.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do more of that, or every year we do something.
Yeah, and that's changing people's perspective, right? To be one of their normal, the often perspective of fear to a perspective of love, and look, we can do something.
Yeah, I mean, the wolf is a tough candidate.
Yeah.
A lynx, little medium-sized cat, bigger than your domestic cat, but something that can take down a small road there. Everybody loves the lynx. It's, oh my God, look how beautiful it is.
Yeah.
So, but a wolf, which is so directly related to dogs, a wolf by a lot of people in rural communities is vilified. And we need to really put that right and get people to understand that wolves have every part to play in an ecosystem, just through beavers and insects, butterflies, bees, and so on. Every animal has a part to play on this planet, apart from humans. When it comes to the ecosystem and running an imbalanced environment, we're the ones that are messing it up all the time.
Yeah.
The sooner we're gone, the better, and all this other stuff can flourish.
Well, it's funny because I used to, for many, many years, I had the narrative in my head that I needed to be doing something to save the planet. And then I realized that if humans got out of the way, the planet would have no problem. So then I changed the way I talked about saving the planet and started talking about what can we do? How can we help make our systems healthier, make the planet healthier, and what's the outcome that we want to see rather than the one we are trying to avoid. And then it was funny because I just read the Lion Tracker's Guide to Life. And in there, he quotes something about, I guess, one of his mentors, I think it was Carolyn Miss. She said, until we raise the consciousness of the planet, we will have a tough time realizing any of these other goals. And I think that this rewilding of species and this work that you're doing, I think that is a form of helping raise the consciousness of the planet, because we get people out of fear when they're hearing these stories and you get them into hope. And it's precisely what Jane Goodall was trying to do for so long. It's why she left the forest in the first place. And so I think that that's really important. And you give something fun for people to talk about. Having worked in climate change for 2 decades until I started this podcast, really, it can get heavy and it can get hard. And we wonder why then more people don't care. But it's easier to just hide than it is to take action. And we don't understand that we could take action and we could get excited about things, even small, like even what Sarah's doing, getting every guest to plant a tree.
Yeah, indeed. One of my mentors, Chris and Doug Tompkins, who founded Tompkins Conservation, and they'd made their money from North Face, Esprit clothing, and Patagonia.
Yeah.
Chris always talks about just get out of bed every day and just do something other than feel self and take action on anything, whatever it might be. And I think there's very wise words. And as far as the Tompkins are concerned, their philanthropy, really, I mean, they're the largest rewilders on the planet. They managed to put into nature conservation 15 million acres of land.
Wow. Wow.
In Chile and Argentina. The Rewilding Chile and Rewilding Argentina. And it's just a phenomenal story. And there's a lovely film your listeners should tune into. It's called Wildlife, 2 separate words, Wildlife.
Okay.
And it's on National Geographic and Disney, I think it is. You can find it, but it's an amazing documentary about their lives and what they've been doing. And I get huge inspiration from people like them, Sarah Tompkins, Adrian Gardner in South Africa as well. People have been at the sort of spiky end of conservation for a while.
Yeah.
The sharp end, you know, the sharp end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pointy end of conservation.
Yes.
Prodding all the time, prodding, you know, and making a bit of a noise and sometimes a nuisance of themselves. But I think you mentioned on it earlier, consciousness, and I think that comes about from education. And I think one of the greatest things we need to do is look at the school's curriculum and see how much time we spend worrying about physics, chemistry, biology, and I don't know, history and science and whatever, as opposed to actually being human beings and understanding our place on the planet and how we depend on its resources. It doesn't depend on us.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's almost like we need consciousness classes at school and to, you know, bring people up to think, you know, the impact we have. But there are many other things that people can do to every day of their lives to make things better.
So it feels to me like you sort of hit that moment in the 40s where you're in the dumps that you've followed your heart ever since. And is that how you would characterize the decisions that you've made since then? You know, the decisions to go in a certain direction or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that having that shift at the age of 40, from that point on, I've reviewed everything. And I've learned a lot along the way. It's like anything else. You know, you start out, you can make a lot of mistakes. But the best thing you can do when starting something like what I was doing is find others that are doing something similar and try and learn different things and techniques and protocols from them. And that's what I've been doing. But in Scotland, we've been kind of pioneers. But I'm not the only one. There are others. There are others in Scotland. Anders Poulsen, the Danish gentleman, he's got huge swathes of land in Scotland. You know, Anders is very keen on rewilding. The Rousing sisters from the Tetra Pak family, they're doing great work on the land they have. But there's more and more people getting involved with this nature restoration in Britain. And I think Britain's called the first rewilding nation.
Oh.
I think that's no bad thing to set that target and say, right, let's... Even friends of mine in East Anglia set up a foundation called the Wild East to get farmers in East Anglia just to be a little bit more gentle and let some of the edges go wild and stuff like this.
Right.
It's interesting. It's spreading. The rewilding concept is spreading. It always meets with a little bit of resistance.
Yeah.
In places like Spain, where there's a lot of traditional landowners.
Yeah.
And I don't do tradition myself. I like to break tradition because, you know, just because grandparents did it, why does it mean we have to do it?
Yeah.
You know, they were around. There was 2 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
Right? There's now 8 billion. So circumstances are different. You know, for instance, I think all humans overeat. We all overeat. We all think we have 3 meals a day. Why do we have to have 3 meals a day? You know, why is there so much obesity around? We should eat less. If we eat less, there's less suffering, more land to be rewild and to create carbon sequestration and forests to grow instead of having herds and herds of cattle everywhere. We need to think about stuff. We need to change. So when people say, well, traditionally we've done this, I go, oh, really, have you? Well, maybe you need to look inwardly and think about it differently. The reindeer herders of northern Scandinavia traditionally push a lot of reindeer around the place, right? Not exactly the most thriving industry there is. And yet they don't tolerate any wolves, wolverines or bears or lynx in their domain. So they have a whole belt across Scandinavia, which means all the wolves that are in Sweden can't be replenished by new stock or new genes from Russia coming down because they're all shot.
Right.
That is not right in today's day and age. We need to think about, we need to share the planet with nature. We don't need to get rid of it.
Yeah. And that learning about the apex predators and their role. And it can certainly be scary. I know my husband's always talking to me about sharks. So it's the same kind of thing about the misunderstood species and their role. What are you excited about? Looking forward. I mean, you've got a big trip coming up, but in general, what are some of the things you're excited about?
It's a challenging question for me, that, because despite what I do, I'm still an anarchist. Okay, so it's not so easy for me to answer. But one thing that I'm excited about is business and industry getting involved with nature and nature conservation, and particularly when it comes to carbon and to look after ecosystems, planting trees, whatever it might be. I think there's a lot more awareness in industry to put something back. What still concerns me is that when money has been made from industry and individuals have been highly successful, is that those families are not doing enough and the money gets stashed away in a Swiss account somewhere. And to be honest with you, how many billions does a family need? I mean, honestly speaking, how many billions do one need to live on? And you start looking at big families in Europe, and I don't need to say who they are, but they're out there, and they're worth, 2 or 3 of them are worth in excess of 100 billion.
Wow.
And I think, what did they get all that money? What could they could do some incredible things. They'd get far more positive publicity. Their stock price would probably go up because we think these are great people and all sorts. But
well, maybe they're waiting to be inspired by one of your stories, Paul.
That's what I try and do. I try and get to meet some of these folks. Not so easy. And it's always easier when you take somebody into a place. You go for a walk in nature for 2 or 3 days and the penny drops. Sometimes people are so busy creating wealth, they haven't figured out how to give it away. Once they're triggered, they can do it. It's possible. So hopefully people these days are thinking about reproduction. I know there's a lot of people deciding not to have children or to have one instead of multiple kids, because ultimately humanity is the problem on this planet. We're the problem of creating climate change and everything else that goes with that, including migration of people and food shortages and crop failures and wildfires and things. So I'm hoping that with less people, and if we see a population decline, then things might be better. But when you talk about declining population, then people go, oh, that means reduction. A capital world, we only think of growth.
I know.
So we're in a bit of a sort of a crazy 8, and we need to educate our way out of that and understand that as we are the problem, if there's less of us, there'll be less of a problem. And then you've got AI. Then you've got AI coming up. I was listening to a podcast this morning with Tony Robbins, actually. And he's freaking about AI and about how, what are we going to do short term when, taxi drivers' jobs and factory workers' jobs are all replaced by robots and driverless cars. What are we going to do with all those people that had those jobs? What is AI? The short-term effects of AI is going to be pretty catastrophic. So there are good people out there thinking of solutions, and Tony might be one of them.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of good people that you're running into, and the ones in your trust, and the ones doing projects, and the ones that just need to hear of some good ideas and a different perspective and think, okay, I heard about this. Let me try to do something similar, or let me go out into nature. Maybe this is the reminder that we need to just go into nature and be into nature and see what we're prioritizing and be more of a human being rather than a human doing.
So all those trips that you made at the end of your business trips and the ones that I did, that's what led me to this place I'm in. And I can't be happier, really. I love what I do. Do manage to sleep at night. A lot of people I know who are in this game, they just fight every minute of every day. I do have some recreational time, I think it's important.
Yeah. Well,
To that end,
and
I'm going off to a detox retreat on Sunday for 10 days in Tenerife, and I can't wait.
oh, wow. That
Like,
sounds amazing.
I'll still be working, but I won't be going out and about, and I'll just be staying in one place and
Right.
eating the
So,
food they give me.
so I've enjoyed our conversation and listening to what sort of influenced you and brought you into Alladale and the nature reserve. And in wrapping up, what do you think are some words of wisdom that you can share with our listeners?
I think here's some words of wisdom. I think when you're choosing your next vacation, try and get away from the beach and try and go into the hinterland and try and have a nature-based holiday, whether it be walking, cycling, or just touring in a car. But try and go to a place of nature and try and spend a week or more. Go exploring and go for walks and just get out there in the forest, wherever it might be. Could be Macedonia, North Macedonia, could be northern Spain, Asturias, could be central Italy, could be the Romanian Carpathians. Come on one of our trips at the European Nature Trust, one of our coexistence adventures. And I'm sure when you've spent time, and not a day or two, but a week, that you will fall in love with what you've seen, and you'll think very carefully where you spend your money in future and what kind of trips you want to experience. Because for me, lying on a beach, just getting skin cancer is not really an option. That's highly boring. And you probably don't meet many people. And too many people these days are making short trips. And I talk about the travel industry as skimming, dipping, and diving. Skimming is when you go off to a wedding, a stag party, a concert, a football game, one night somewhere, get in a plane, boom, boom. That's hopeless. I mean, that is just terrible travel. And then there's dipping, where you spend a week or two somewhere. And I recommend a lot more dipping. And diving is when you go away for months and you work remotely or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I would propose more dipping, people going to fewer places, researching those fewer places and going for longer and really learning something and taking something away, exchanging with local people in the community, learning, as opposed to having a quick fix and coming home, having a hangover.
Well, and I think that's, when you're in that high stress job and you feel like you just need a break, you think, oh, well, I just need to rest. I just need to lie on a beach. And we forget about that rejuvenative power of nature, that the more we spend walking in the mountains or walking in nature somewhere, the more energy we get back. And we just think by default, I need to rest. But maybe,
No, I mean,
I hear you saying we need to rest in a different way.
Well, maybe have one holiday on the beach here and then the other holiday get into the forest. There are so many places in Europe to go. As I said before, there's probably 5% of Europe that's pretty wild and intact.
Yeah.
The rest been farmed. But go to those places, explore them, find them. And if people have a problem, they should look at our trips on our website.
Oh, that sounds good. I'll put a link.
Plenty of inspiration. We have about 8 trips going on this year, 8 or 9.
Okay.
Next year we'll probably have 15. And we really get deep into places. And we put together great groups of 10 or 12 people.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for being on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed this discussion.
Shannon, my pleasure. And I look forward to hosting you in Scotland in the near future.
Thank you for joining me on the Miles to Zen podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, follow, or leave a comment so we can keep growing this community together. This podcast was created by Shannon Miles Halliday with original music by Anna Vovziniak.